let's talk about startups and music. And Joel, I might kind of start on you here, because you have the interesting experience of kind of coming from the music industry that most people in this room would recognise and moving into that startup space and working in technology. Do you want to just give us a quick overview of kind of the changes that you see between the two industries and what you're seeing in the startup space?
Cool, yeah, well, I'll talk about the parallels first. There's a surprisingly large amount of parallels with artist management and venture capital and startups and technology generally, which I wasn't expecting at all. So firstly, like, again, I was an artist manager. You spend your time as an artist manager just walking through the world trying to find really brilliant people who are trying to do really cool things, and when you find one, you grab on as tight as you can and then you just try and help them. And venture capital is the same. It's the same thing. You know, meet a million people, you go to a million places, you try and like find these like little nuggets everywhere, and when you find someone who you think is special, you help them. The only difference is the way you help them. Like in VC, you give them heaps of money, and in artist management, you give them your heart, your time, and your intellect. So that's really similar. The other thing that's really similar is that artists, I've noticed, are really similar to founders. They're kind of weird people. They're a little bit off center, and it's stuff that's really hard to quantify. But when you meet one, right? Like you can just tell that it's a person with something special. So that was really those things were quite surprising to me. But the other thing that I found was quite similar is just the way the industry kind of operates. It's built on hits, and it's the same with startups and technology. The same with music. You maybe have let's say you got 10 startups or 10 bands or whatever it is. Maybe one or two of those are going to be like really, really massive, and the others are kind of like there's some in the middle tier, and then there's some that are a little bit below that. So that was a really similar thing as well. It wasn't as difficult a transition as I thought it would be.
Have you seen many startups in the music space in Blackbird? Are you guys investing in many? Are many coming to ask for money?
Heaps come to ask for money. We haven't invested in any. And that's there's a lot of reasons for that. To give you some scope, we've seen about 2,500 companies in the last couple of years, and we invested in about 35. And that doesn't mean I'm talking 2,500 is every email we get. It's the same as working with artists. You get 1 million emails from artists who need representation, or they want a show, or they want to do a support or whatever. And only a few number of those you end up actually working with. We've just recommended our first music tech company to an accelerator we run called StartMate. So that's called Paper Chain, sitting down the front here. Raise your hand. That's solving a lot of the metadata issues in the music industry and rights management, and using the blockchain to do that. The reason we thought that was interesting, or the reason that we haven't invested in a lot of music tech companies is, first of all, like I say, it's really hard. Our bar is very, very high. We only invest in things in people that we think are absolutely extraordinary, and ideas that we think could be absolutely huge, in really, really big markets. And that's just the nature of, the economics of venture capital. You need hits, you need really, really big things. But I guess the reason so far is that we don't see a lot of things that are completely transformative. We see a lot of technology solutions for existing paradigms, and we look for things that want to knock the paradigm over, or just drive a truck right through it. And that's it's a difficult thing to do in music, because you have these institutional pillars that are quite hard to move. So we're super keen for music tech. I think music generally has been responsible for the success of some of the biggest technology companies in the world in the last 20 years. Apple brought itself back from the dead based off the back of music, and Spotify is one of the biggest tech companies in the world. So there's definitely a way to create really big returns and make a lot of money from music tech. It's just a difficult thing to do.
Georgie, I kind of want to go to you now, talking about the startup space. We were having a discussion around Google in the startup space.
Yeah, so Google more widely supports the startup ecosystem in a number of different ways, and I'm not an expert on those areas, but I think what's relevant here is how we look at artists and creators on YouTube, and we basically look at very similar actually in that everyone is potentially a startup. and they're the same as a founder in that they've got that passion, but they haven't necessarily got the full skills to build a business. So we've got kind of a number of programs that we run which help creators and musicians to try and build a full suite of capabilities. So we run business boot camps, for instance. We've got production spaces where they can come and create more content. We run events like FanFest where they can get together as a community and share ideas and collaborate and kind of troubleshoot together. That's really kind of heart of what we do. And I think the other thing that's really important about what we do is our platform is kind of agnostic. So it doesn't matter how big a partner you are or how small you are. You still have the same access to things like the analytics, all the same tools and services on the platform. And that's because we kind of don't really want to differentiate between who might be the biggest in the future or who's to say, right? We just want to make sure that our tools and everything are available for everyone. So I think that's kind of how we think about startups. And as a consequence, there are a lot of creators and musicians in Australia now that have built businesses where they're employing teams of sort of 5 to 10 people from YouTube. I think we've got something like over 50 channels now that have 1 million subscribers, which basically means they can support a team of sort of 5 to 10. And there's a few musicians in there too, so it's pretty exciting. Flume's nearly there, by the way, so that's very exciting.
This question's open up to the whole panel. The last Music Tech Summit, Stephen Phillips from We Are Hunted was talking about PopGun, which was a company that helps write pop hits. So uses computers and algorithms and technology to figure out what the audience is going to be most into, kind of taking away some of that creative part that we'd like to think perhaps can't be taken away by computers. Do you think we are kind of going down that path where music and the kind of that creative part is going to be taken over by computers?
You can absolutely write a pop hit with a computer, 100%. But I only say that because I don't have a high respect for pop hits. It's seriously. Like, you could create an algorithm, like you could analyze all of the hits of the last 20 years, create an algorithm which could repeat that. And that's what people do anyway, right? Like, there is a very clear formula that's used in, the top of the charts. And right now, people use that formula. They're the ones that engage it. But it's completely possible, I think, to, write an algorithm and use machine learning to create, whatever, the next Taylor Swift.
Does anyone know who Benny Blanco is? He's a very intelligent man and an amazing songwriter who's written hits that you're describing. And not just straight, but he doesn't play instruments. He just fiddles and comes up with stuff. I mean, that's already happening. If you look at Dr. Luke, like if you went up to Dr. Luke's studios when I'm not sure if they're still there, but in the day it was like just walking into like the Kentucky Fried Chicken of, as far as I'm concerned, of you're just going, wow. And it's just all these people just like algorithming and just listening to things, and I'm just like, okay, this is incredible.
Algorithming.
Yeah. So
it's a new instrument, the algorithm.
Yeah, no, that's the future, algorithming. Yeah.
Sounds like a DJ. DJ algorithming.
Alice, what do you think about that?
So there's a principle in tech called structured serendipity, which is our new frontier, which is about creating serendipitous encounters, pretty much. And it's a big challenge, can you build an algorithm that allows you to get outside the feed? And I think music, in a lot of ways, is very same-ish, and it's really interesting. We're just talking about how ARIA is now including streaming data, how you could actually end up in this very same-ish kind of space. But I think the beauty of music is one person who's very different comes in and changes the way everything sounds, and that's what an algorithm can't do. I think that's at its core what's the joy of everyone in this room, is that structured serendipity, an algorithm can't predict what's going to come next, because often what comes next sounds vastly different to anything sounds before.
That's 100% true. And the reason why I got invited to Dr. Luke's studio was because I managed Gautier, and when somebody I used to know went to number one and stayed there for over, I think it was 12 weeks in the end in the US. This guy was getting so upset about it because he's like, I just can't figure out this has changed things, man. Like, this is crazy. And we're just going, yeah. And that's 100%. And that's what's exciting. I do genuinely think while there will be people using all forms of technology as they are to continue to push rhythm, push sound. It's not necessarily going to, like, there's still that human thing that you can't take away from, like, being able to push it. Could be wrong, but
I'm not saying though that it's going to create, like, that a computer could make good music that's going to be boundary pushing. I like the question is, could a computer write a top 10 hit? And I think absolutely. Is a computer going to be responsible for taking things in, to the next level or into a whole different place? I don't know. I mean, you talk to people who are like hardcore AI guys, and they'll say yes, but I'm with you there. I don't think so.
Yeah, I can't help but think about K-pop a lot, right, as well, when we're having this conversation. Like, it's not just the sound, right, it's also the whole imagery as well of the bands, and we're already been engineering for a long time.
Open to the panel now, what else technology-wise do you think has the potential to kind of change the whole direction of where music industry is going at the moment?
I think technology is a lot of is the ability to change like the live arena quite significantly. There's a whole bunch of different things that people haven't thought of them all yet. But you look at what's happening in VR or in audience participation or in being able to experience, have a live experience without actually being in a room with the band. Like, I think there's a lot of room there.
Do you often wonder, I remember seeing the 2-pack, what do you call it again?
Hologram.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, wow, that's going to become massive, because I was like, shit, that's, for a sec, it was just so, it's only like 20 seconds or something, but it was certainly compelling, and I do wonder how that could be, and I've seen similar things in Korea, in K-pop studios, and you kind of look at it and you think, wow, this could easily become something. I can only assume that will at some point become like a very serious thing.
And do you think, kind of as a festival promoter, that having a hologram of a band or performance will take off? The costs are cheaper,
not?
Obviously.
First ever hologram festival. Just bring them out. Let's go. Fund me? You want to fund me, bro?
Or less for those artists than you do.
Come
for
on,
the
I
dead
can
ones.
get this going. Imagine that. I mean, you'd have to talk to Universal to clear all the band's rights, but like after you've done that,
Anyone in the room?
away you go. Like, you're off. Like, I mean, hypothetically, imagine getting that amazingly presented with David Bowie, with whoever your heroes are that are just physically never going to be performing in real life. I think it'd be pretty interesting.
It does feel like a couple of years ago, when the 2-pack Coachella thing happened, holograms, it was all the rage and everyone was talking about it, and then it just died off a bit. And I'm wondering if it's because either people's reaction to it wasn't the same as seeing a live performer.
There's like this, again, nerd, but another, like, at South by this year, at the tech conference, everyone was talking about this humanisation of tech. The fact that we're not going to see any new tech, we've kind of reached the peak of it. VR, AR, hearables, etc. We're kind of done, like, in fairness. And now it's all about humanisation. Everyone kept mentioning the empathy machine, or this concept of the adjacent possible. And the adjacent possible is once you stop doing this, so you stop inventing new VRs, etc., you then have to do a sideways. And you have to go, well, what the fuck are we using this for? And I think for ages, everyone's been guilty of it. We just got distracted by bright, shiny things. Well, we have to do a 2-pack, or we have to do a hologram. And no one's like, and I think this is the beauty of festivals at Laneway, the ones that still survive, is like, what the do our audience want? Like, forget the novelty. Like, why are they here? Why are they coming to us? And then could we use tech to provide that? And I think I truly believe this is the future of tech and music, is stop thinking about like, ooh, bright, shiny thing. Start thinking about like, well, why is my fan coming to me? And if your artist is all about connection and emotional empathy, then maybe haptics, which allow you to feel through a phone, are the perfect way to do that, because it's about feeling. But if you're just doing it for the sake of it, I think like that's the end.
I was going to say exactly the same thing, because there's lots and lots now of 360 videos on YouTube, and I was taking some time today to look through a selection of them, and it's like, how do you use 360 to make what you're doing even more immersive? And there's this really cool program that my colleague Sophie ran with the Hilltop Hoods. It's an interaction thing called Through the Dark. I don't know if anyone's seen it. But they basically created this whole new platform for Through the Dark, and it was to raise money for one of the Hilltop Hoods guys' son has leukemia. And the track is all about his story with his son. And it's a 360 experience, and as you flip the video, you basically go into a dark world where there's lots of fear, or you can move into the sort of the light world where there's lots of hope. And the track already is like super powerful, but kind of moving between that sort of tension of how they must be feeling all the time just makes it even more powerful. I thought it was a really good example. They've actually used it as opposed to it perhaps just being 360 on a set with people just sort of dancing around the edges, you know?
Yeah, that's it. Like, but for this technology, could this story be told as well? Or could I get this same emotional impact?
Yeah. We see, like, what you're talking about is, we see this a lot, like it's with the hologram and it's with the haptics, there's all that kind of stuff. It's, you know, hardware or technology looking for a problem, right? And when one of the things that we look at when we're deciding whether we want to invest in a company is like, what is the problem that they're trying to solve? How have they come to that? Like, how have they discovered the problem? How deep is their connection to it? And how many people are, you know, how deeply painful is this problem for at least a small group of people? And I think that's the kind of thing that we see with a lot of music stuff is it's like, well, we can do this hologram thing or we can do this like VR thing, but like no one's actually stopping to ask what the real deep like problems are in music or, you know, for fans or anything like that. And I think that, you know, it's up to people, and this, you know, panels like this help with that, and, you know, getting a whole group of people help with that because it forces you to like start to ask, well, what are the great problems and how can we solve them?
Yeah, it certainly feels like 360 video, virtual reality, augmented reality. It's in that kind of experimentation phase where people are doing it, you know, as entertainment. I don't know what problem you're solving by having a 360 video. I think you're probably creating one. Do you think, thinking of those technologies, so 360, the augmented reality, virtual reality, their applications in music going forward, kind of for the music industry, do you think either for artists or for promoters or for managers, what kind of problem could that solve in the future?
Neil Young sold tickets to his sold-out conference the other day, and you could experience the live stream, and then they tried to do this VR experience of it, which tanked. But that's kind of interesting. Like, if it's something that's got high value, you can't access it, but you could be there. I can see that kind of making sense, like for a consumer, because live streaming's already kind of there. People are willing to watch a Coachella live stream, so I can see VR, you know, being in the crowd, feeling like you're there, being a possibility for Uber fans, but I don't really believe that's mass technology. Might be naive. Like, I don't believe 40,000 people are going to pay to watch Neil Young in VR.
Maybe not Neil Young, but possibly like more like younger artists. Do you know what I mean? Where kids are kind of like, because it's so. Coachella's a good example of a live broadcast. I mean, this was 6 years ago. They were getting bigger numbers than SNL, which is, you know, the thing to do in America is a live TV performance. So you sort of think about it and think the numbers are there. You know, like there's a reason why, you know, Google is sponsoring it. There's a reason why Red Bull are putting money into those things because there's an audience. So yeah, I wondered whether if you took it to because when I watched a bit of the Coachella one, and I was like, fuck, wow. You just go, this is like, you're there. You're kind of, you're not there, but you know what I mean? Like you could take some acid and, you know.
We were just talking about that.
Anyway. So what is the value then? What is the real value, do you think, if I can ask that question? Is it that you get to like see an artist perform a song on a stage, or is it that you get to maybe experience something that other people in the world are experiencing?
I'm not trying to be the funny guy here. I'm just probably trying to use humour to fake my way in or something. But I will say another thing. The Fire Festival. Who would have loved to have been at the Fire Festival watching it? Who would have loved to have watched the Fire Festival
Hands
live?
up.
Wow, you would have lost your mind. So I kind of reckon there's loads of reasons that people... And there's that FOMO thing that's just... Kids want to be somewhere where they may not be able to... They may have missed out on tickets. They can't afford it. It's all about that feeling of missing out. And that creates ways for people to engage where they're there. I know when people talk to us about Laneway content, they want to be like... They want to be as, you know... Cannons of confetti are coming out of like cannons. You know, they want that vibe. You know, they want you in the cannon. Like they just want that. So I think there is an element of desire for that.
I want to move on now to the artists and kind of the role that technology can play. I'll start at the beginning. Kind of let's talk about an artist that's coming up, that's kind of trying to break through. The role that technology today can play in breaking an artist. How is that changing?
So I know in some kind of the early thoughts with discussion we were having was around how transparent as an artist you now are and like how much you let people into your life. And I guess what we see from our side is that technology just makes it much easier for artists to have a direct connection with their fans and to be really open about how their career is developing and kind of what's working, what's not working, and to tell a complete story about their life. So I think that's kind of really evolving in a new way. And then also just the sort of the increased emphasis now on the power of content and on everything around the track. And so we see kind of just the artists that are doing well think like really holistically throughout the year about what content they can create throughout the year and what creative things they can do. I had a great example from a label at Zelon this beginning of the week, who to help some of their talent have actually started using drones to film. They almost look like still images until you look at them a little bit closer and you realise actually there's things moving, like skateboarding parks or football parks and stuff that they're using instead of still images to upload some of the sort of secondary tracks from albums to the platform. I thought that was really cool. So I think I think artists and managers and labels that can think really creatively about how to create other interactive forms of content, they're going to do well.
Yeah, great. Joel and Danny, you guys have obviously broken a lot of artists over a wide period of time. How has that changing for you now?
We moved through technology very quickly, right? So, it was MySpace, we talked about that for a second, right through to SoundCloud. You think of Future Classic as a label who really used SoundCloud probably better than anyone in the world to kind of really push out both the brand and many of their artists. So, I think that we're always thinking of ways to work with YouTube. I think there's no one particular way though. Like obviously getting like lots of playlists on Spotify and Apple positioning and stuff. All that stuff is sort of 2.0 really now. But like it's really, you've got to have a suite of ideas. I still really do believe that the songs still do the talking. Like if the song's good, and sometimes I hear a song and I think, wow, how did that have that many hits? But the hits don't lie, right? It's the reality. It's connecting with an audience. So, yeah.
Joel?
I would I think the easiest and most accessible way now that artists can like get some kind of edge, and this wasn't really a thing when I was managing, but is like really using data to understand who your fans are. And there's like so much stuff you could probably talk a little bit about this, but there's so much that you can understand now about the people who like you and who want to go to your shows and who buy your music. And I don't know, do you think artists would ever take a look at that, try and understand their audience and then adjust what they're doing, not just strategically, but adjust, say, the music that they write, the way they play shows? Would they use data and change for their audience? Do you think that's the role of the artist?
You sort of hope not, in a way. Like personally, I wouldn't be like, hey, your audience is like this and I think you need to move slightly more to an alternative country sound, and they're going, well, so I know what you mean though. Like I think the analytics are critical. Like there's so much information you can get about, because you're right, it's like any brand, when you do any brand analysis and you go, oh wow, I thought it was this, and it's this. And I've certainly had the conversation with artists where I'm like going, look, I know you want to be hanging out with Radiohead and walking down and playing ping pong with Arcade Fire after that, but you're probably more down this place, and if you can just go with that a bit more. So I guess that's saying, look, we know who your audience is, let's not... Yeah, it's a good point, but I think the analytics is all about looking at so many elements: age, gender, where they live. That's also such a fascinating thing. Like I'll look at Google and look at Spotify and stuff and go, oh wow, like we've got like this, all this listenership is predominantly coming out of Northern Europe. What's that about? All those. So you ask questions, you start talking to promoters, figuring out if there's a way to kind of look at that closely.
Danny, sorry, Joel, just 2 seconds. What data do you, just while we're talking about data, what data do you look at most importantly? Like, there's obviously, you can drown in data.
I guess the one I look at the most for artists is Spotify. Like, that's just because it's transparent and what they're about to do with the launching of their back end, which facilitates managers and artists and not just labels. And the labels have this access as well. It means that we can really get closer to information that I feel is on point that I can go, okay, that's interesting. We need to pay attention to whatever that is. So
I was going to ask you, so you can now, would you ever book Laneway based on what your audience is listening to on Spotify? So will you get hints about bands that are coming out and book someone based on that? Or Google?
It's actually confused things a lot, actually, because you look at some artists and you think, okay, wow. Like, I do watch it, I do pay attention. I mean, I think when we're rolling out artist campaigns, here's something I do. Well, we make a list of all of the kind of artists that we think are in our wheelhouse of that particular artist. And they don't have to sound the same, they're just in a space. It might be emerging, breaking artists. And we just look at all their socials, and we have someone in the office that just updates them weekly, and we can be like, oh wow, the Twitter feed's going nuts. And just trying to look at why that happened. Like, why did that happen? Like, what was that? Was it just something they said? Was it a photo? Looking at how people use Instagram, like, okay, wow, like you look at, for example, and we do actually do this with Laneway a little bit. I'll be looking at artists that I really like Grimes, and going, wow, her Instagram is as big as like a mainstream pop artist. If you look at her other sort of socials, they're not quite as big. And just sort of asking those questions about how people present themselves aesthetically and then across the board. But we have like a really simple spreadsheet. It's not complicated. List of 30 artists who are out at the moment, and we constantly rotate it, and we just have a list and we just watch their socials. It's just a really interesting way to look, and then have a conversation with your team about like, wow, that's really interesting. And then also watching artists, like, when they go out of cycle, really drop away, and then some just stay there, and you go, what's that about? Like, all those sorts of questions help you sort of maybe try and get a sense of who your market is and what works.
Yeah. Is the age of a mega artist over?
I still think they're big artists. There are still big artists. I just think we're judging them by standards of the Beatles. Like, Drake is huge. Yeah. Beyonce is huge. Like, it's urban acts. I think, like, artist in a lot of ways is because they're not bands. Like, if I'm being honest, it's like, oh my God, there's, it's a crisis, but it's because there's no bands that are massive anymore, stadium bands. Like,
I think there's also, like, the Drakes and the Weekends, these artists, they're turning content over, like, it just blows my mind. And they've got hundreds of people helping them write songs, but you sit there going, well, and the quality of the songs is really high, it's like contemporary high, and they're big acts. Like, they're selling massive amounts of tickets, and they've got fan bases on every point of the globe. So I don't know if it's over at all. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think there's more opportunities for. I guess that's that commitment, that prolificness you have to have. I think those artists at the moment who are right at like, I sort of watch that Drake Weekend thing, like a lot of people do, I guess, to a certain extent. I think, wow, they're just literally flipping over, and it's like a boxing match,
Yeah, I was just going to touch on the global opportunity. Like, it feels like more and more people are accessible now than ever before with the music that you're delivering. So I think that just naturally makes, if you get it right on certain platforms, you're naturally going to reach a much bigger audience pretty easily.
Great. The other thing that's often said about kind of technology now, and particular Spotify and playlists and things like that, is that are consumers becoming less passionate about certain particular artists and becoming more passionate about a genre?
Yes, I think that's true. We do a big survey. We survey our audience all the time, but this is actually one of the most, like, coming from music, profound changes I've noticed is, like, the death of the Uber fan. For time immemorial, we know when you were a young person, you were that guy who just was obsessed with one band, and you knew everything there was to know about them, and that's what defined you. And that doesn't exist anymore. Like, we've talked about this before, but yeah, knowledge. You need to know little bits of everything. You just need to know the little snippet of that song. I've heard that before. That concept of album or completism just doesn't exist. And the way we at Vice have had to write about music has had to change because of that. Like, we've moved from music criticism, which was about, like, an album and people were willing to dive into it and understand the nuance, to music journalism, which is about a person, and we have to usually align them to a social issue or a cause for people to pay attention. Like, it has to be remarkable now because people aren't coming to us to find out about Chance the Rapper, like, or whatever it may be. Like, that interest in person just isn't there anymore. It needs to be PR worthy or remarkable or aligned to a bigger thing.
Yeah, just to back that up, YouTube's showing very similar stats. So people, I think it's like 80% of music views come through recommended like what to watch next. And so it definitely is like a discovery platform for, still could be for huge artists. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're only discovering emerging content, but it's not that sort of lean in experience. It's much more of a kind of lean back experience.
I think it's because artists are way more accessible now. Like you don't need to seek out a publication where a journalist managed to score like 2 hours with your favorite artists. You can get to them in any number of ways. Like it's really, really easy to find information or interviews or videos or whatever. Like you can like read their Twitter feed and they're speaking directly to you. So I don't know, like, and I also think it's got to do with attention span. You know, if an artist, that's why people are releasing more music, right? And more frequently, is because if you go off cycle for too long, you lose all your audience because there's someone else there to take your place.
It's interesting that we saw this from a media side. At Junkee Media, we had Faster Louder, which we launched in 2004, which was back in the day when you chose were you a dance fan or a rock fan, and you kind of couldn't be both. If you went to Big Day Out, you went to Boiler Room or the main stage. You kind of didn't move between the two. And it was this year when we realised, we did lots of research, we realised that those kind of the genres are gone now. We relaunched Fast Louder as Music Junkie, with the idea being that people just like music. So you can like, Adele and Beyonce and a band and Childish Gambino.
That was like totally off that. It's just stat to back it up. 78% of our respondents, young people, said they couldn't be defined by the genre they listened to. Like it's totally what Tim's saying, but that's actually profound when you think about it. Like as a young person, you walked into a room and you said, "What kind of music do you listen to?" And if I said pop and you said rap, we weren't friends. And now that doesn't happen. So it's like, just when we think about music listening, it's completely different. Because if I'm no longer like defining myself by trap or anything else, then it's really hard from a music marketing perspective or an artist management. How do I pigeonhole you? You have to kind of create these interesting either personalities or kind of art pieces around an artist, because no one cares what genre you're part of anymore.
I think that's really, I agree with what you're saying there, and I do think that if you talk to artists, that's what they say. You meet an artist, they don't go, "Oh yeah, I just like heavy metal because I'm into heavy metal." Like every artist I've ever worked with loves such a cross. So there's two ways of. I guess it's been the way it's been presented to a certain extent, and because there's so many options for kids to enter into their understanding of music, that no longer do they get defined by just one thing. And I guess it does come back to the days of, I guess when I was a kid, of course, when, you saved up, you bought a CD. You went to Brash's with your gift card and you bought that CD you really wanted. You waved it around and then someone stole it at a house party the next night, and I still want that CD back.
And you listen to almost every track on the album.
Yeah.
50 times.
That's the difference.
At Crowded House this year, at the Opera House, which was a wonderful concert series, and every single song, and they were all great, of course, but I was with a friend of mine, I said, this just would not exist today. Like to have, and it was a beautiful feeling. It was like a team of people, or like all these fans just singing their hearts out, and I think that doesn't exist. You're 100% right. And going back to the question about promoting, that does make it really hard, because when we look at Laneway, we want to and we're like, wow, people come like, this is just sold out like the Metro in 5 seconds, and it's like this one big hot song, and you're like, yeah, but what is this? And you try and figure that out, and that's the hardest bit, is like, what is this? Because there's no uber fan of that act. I mean, they're into it, they're certainly fans, but they're just not. Yeah, it's a bizarre thing.
That's why I think, like, we saw Confidence Man the other day at Falls Fest. Like, I think booking is changing because of it, because, like, everyone's either living for the one song that they know, and then it's just like, because they're not listening to the whole album. Like, I've noticed it at festivals heaps. Or you just start booking these, like, highfalutin performance acts that are just kind of, like, yeah, the Confidence Man thing really stuck out for me. They're just built to perform at a festival, and that's what that act is. But that's kind of interesting. Like, the Crowded House is kind of replaced by...
Confidence.
Yeah, Confidence Man.
What is the one technology that you're seeing at the moment that you are most excited about?
It's not music related, it's space.
Cool.
There's like, yeah, we're on the verge of like a space industry in Australia. It's super exciting. We just invested in a couple of, like a rocket company, we invested in a satellite company.
Space is cool.
Yeah, space is super cool. In our lifetime, people will be on Mars, we'll be like trying to colonize other planets, I think. So that's exciting.
That's cool. Georgie?
So mine's not related to music either, and it's similar. It's actually about saving our planet rather than going to other planets. So I think it's really nerdy, but I'm really into energy storage. And what's happening with renewables and how, like, hopefully, before we all kill each other, we'll be able to save our planet.
Hopefully. Fingers crossed. Alice.
Hearables. I'm obsessed with hearables at the moment, which is like the Amazon Alexa or Echo, where you talk at it and it tells you what's there. I just think it's really interesting that, like, the rise of podcasts, our entertainment is incredibly auditory now and not so much visual, and I think that's really interesting that very soon you'll be able to talk at a device and it will talk back to you.
And Danny.
I was going to say that. Thank you.
Good answer. My Amazon Alexa is... Has anyone kind of tried the Alexa? It feels like it's taking something like Siri that's kind of been around for a while, but just made it really so much better. I've got one at home at the moment. My boyfriend is travelling the world for 12 months, so I'm living by myself essentially. And every morning, Alexa has replaced my boyfriend now. So I come downstairs and Alexa reads me the news and she times my eggs to be cooked. And I told my boyfriend not to bother coming back because I've replaced him with Alexa.
Doesn't vibrate
reads
yet.
you the news?
Doesn't everyone's boyfriend? Isn't that a thing?
That is cool.
Okay, so we might now, on that note, put it over to you guys to kind of ask some questions of the panel of some of the topics we've talked about or some of the gazillion bits of technology that we haven't had a chance to get to. We're going to go to the anonymous question. Oh, awesome. Cool, thank you. Anonymous had a good question, which has been upvoted, which is all about blockchain. Now, Joel, I might get you first to explain what the hell blockchain is.
You made me talk about blockchain.
And how does blockchain able to manage music metadata?
Blockchain is without getting too far into it, it's a distributed database, and I think the reason, well, it can manage all kinds of data in all kinds of industries. The reason that I think it's interesting for metadata in music is that there have been these power silos in music for a really long time, and there still are. Like, they're not going to go anywhere, but a distributed database isn't owned by anybody. And it doesn't live on any one person's like server. It doesn't like belong to any one particular person. It belongs to everybody. So the problem with metadata and in the music industry is that each like labels, publishers, distributors, they all have their own databases with their own metadata. And there is like a real major problem with inconsistencies in that data. And what does that mean? That means that artists lose out on a bunch of money, because if you try and like report some kind of like earnings or playing, like you try to report a song has been played to a different database in a different country and you've got the wrong data, then that money just goes and sits somewhere else. So the way that blockchain can help that is by first of all, by unifying all of the data and making it, consistent. And the other way is that it reduces it helps to knock down some of those silos. And I think that one of the biggest things that I think holds the music industry back is that there are these power silos. And I think anything that can come along that's going to try and like reduce the influence and the impact that those things have, the better for artists and musicians, I think, in the end.
Awesome, thanks, Joel. There are some great questions here. Sam Lee says, what job functions of the music industry do you see being replaced via the evolution of AI, machine learning and automation?
Well, I mean, we talked about it already, like it's going to be possible to write music with computers. It already is right now, but to write an actual hit is going to be possible. I think that's one way. Actual jobs, I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen in a live arena, like to do with ticketing and things like that. But I think the main thing is, like the most interesting anyway, is that, we may be able to write music, through an algorithm eventually. Not good music necessarily, but music that makes money.
I also think with we have to adjust the changes. So there's moments, I remember, 5-7 years ago, when every single record label in the world, from where we are here, Universal, right across to every indie label, had to just downsize because sales of music was so low, and it was that sort of point between sort of technology, the Spotify thing, and people like human beings, consumers, connecting and being able to sort of mentally go, okay, I don't need that library of CDs I saved up for 10 years. I can now have this library that sits on my computers and I can share it. Like it took that's now on its way. And if you walk into places like Spotify, look, here we are at Universal. They didn't downgrade when they moved into this building. Like there's a lot of like opportunity that's coming back into music because of technology. So it's hard to identify a specific area because I think that's wrong, because each of them ultimately needs at this point in time someone to help function and to roll it out. Going back to, I was at Spotify in New York in October last year, and I was so inspired. I walked in, it was just like 5 levels, all these kids, everybody like working in little pods and built like breakaway rooms, and it was just like there's so much going on, and all these kids were super engaged. Sure, there's some issues with things we discussed around like people like, moving to their dinner table, there's playlists and stuff like that, but there's work, and there's a lot of work, and that's exciting. It's definitely tech though. Kids need to be savvy digitally.
I'll take a slightly contrarian view there. I think that, and I always felt this when I worked in music, that there were just too many people in between like artist and fan. And I was one of them, so I feel okay saying that. Maybe one of the good things that technology can do is reduce that number of people. Like it felt like just a really kind of fat whale in between. And it was a fat whale because at a time like it could sustain and it was okay, and I just think that music changed. And the music industry changed.
On the other side, we were talking about today about how basically artists are becoming more and more diverse in a sense as well. So you actually you don't have such a long tail, you have more like a fatter kind of middle section too. So yeah, maybe the teams can get leaner, but you're going to hopefully have more artists coming through that are actually making successful careers at what they're doing. So kind of the balance can shift that way maybe.
I think what you said is great. I think there's 2 ways to look at that. I think that there's those that can sort of tap into sort of businesses where they might push themselves outwards by signing to a label. But there's also, I love the idea as well of having a young artist and they're not signed, and you're just connecting them through all the social and building their story and controlling that story and being able to kind of navigate that and building up to a place where maybe you go and get support because it's something that's real and you haven't relied on that. So, but yeah, right. I mean, the ability to connect it really quickly is, we all know that's happening and very exciting. I don't think it's going to take away jobs. No. Yeah.
We've got another good question here from Anonymous. Is Prince Philip still alive? Apparently he is, and the Queen... He's retiring. Oh, good. Thank you. Live update. A question here, Danny, this one I think is directed at you. We've seen mainstream festivals die over the last few years and the rise of niche festivals. Do you think it's only a matter of time before this happens again?
I hope not. But yeah, look, I think things change and you have to be able to adapt to change. And I think it's about just kind of knowing what you're doing, like knowing who you are or what you are as an event, and working inside that space. So I think what I've seen, the events that have survived have had a pretty clear, consistent position, whether they're a sort of emerging electronic festival or a more eclectic festival. The ones that have survived have kind of probably stayed quite consistent to what they do. I get asked the other bit of the question is, why do all these festivals fall down in the past? And I think it's, no offence to the person who wrote it, that's everywhere. People have got opinions on that stuff. I just think that there was a period there 4 to 7 years ago, and the whole industry was there was a lot of change going on. There was just things going on that were just not anyone's fault necessarily. It was just the industry had to rethink what it was. Labels, publishers, the dawn of Cobalt is another great example. It was just there was just changes going on, and those that embraced that and were excited by that were able to kind of, I think, survive and in some ways prosper, and those that kind of weren't ready for that change may have been caught out by surprise or just didn't fit with the mould of what they were trying to do.
Another question here, a very good question from Anonymous, lots of anonymous questions. Given musicians are essentially creatives, has the explosion in access been good or bad for their art? Would Bowie's creativity had been killed by trolling?
It's a fantastic question. I think there's pros and cons for sure. I do think it definitely there is an element of things getting exposed to an artist too early. There's a few acts that I really like who are like 15, the people producing music between like the age of 15 and 19, and you're like, wow. Or like young kids who are like 21 that are self-producing records. And that's really inspiring. And I'm 41, so I've got to just kind of go, hang on, mate, you're just an old guy that's, you're never going to have had that education at such a young age and that access to IT and that opportunity. But it is a great question, because I think the magic there. It is the magic of those moments but then are we just nostalgic, to those things? Will in 20 years' time we look back on, current artists and be like, oh, I remember when that Lord song dropped. Oh, I felt so great. Yeah, I'm just, you know what I mean? Like, they're the questions, so.
And there's like artists like Kieran J. Callahan, who's like arguably like our Bowie here, I think. Like, there are still glorious bastards and weirdos, like in the music scene, FKA Twigs, like there are uniquely creative people. But I do think there are like outrageous pockets of samenishness, like all the vaporwave and flume, like there's more same than there's ever been, but that's probably because there's more creators than there's ever been, because technology's allowed them to mimic other people. But no, there'll be another Bowie.
I might finish off on one final question, which was anonymous again. Actually, no, this is from G. Thanks, G. The question was, is technology improving music?
One thing we haven't talked about today at all is, like, we talked a lot about the content, but we haven't talked about the listening experience. And that, without a doubt, is making music better. Like, everyone now, just on their phones, the headphones we all have, like the connected homes, the speakers we have in our homes, like, music is so much better than it was for most people sort of 10 or 20 years ago. So I just want to make sure we didn't miss out on that point, because technology has really helped that space.
Totally, mate. We just invested in a company that has invented headphones that when you put them first on, they do a hearing test on you, kind of like when you see with babies when they're born and they have those things and test different frequencies. And then an algorithm automatically tunes music to your specific hearing. And the result, like if you go and look at videos of people listening to music through these headphones, like I'm talking like record producers, people have been listening to music their whole life. They're absolutely blown away by it. It's like, how can I listen to music my whole life and it sounds like this? So in that respect, yeah, totally. Like I think technology is improving music. Is it improving the quality of like songs that are written? I don't know about that, but yeah, I definitely think there are areas where it's better. Things are better now than they ever were.
It'd be a great question to put like a panel of artists on, like producers and old school artists. If you went from Neil Young to Nick Cave across to sort of say Beyonce, like it'd be fascinating because they all make music in different ways, right? Because there's people that are so committed to analog, especially in music making, that would just be getting so angry right now, going, "Ah, man," And then at the same time, there are these technologies that are providing ways for people to hear music. I think what's exciting is regular people are getting access to better sounding music that they had access to. That's the bit. I'm not sure whether the music being made is better than, records from the 70s that were made in analog. I don't know about that. In fact, I don't believe they do.
Awesome. Listen, we've got to finish up here. I'd like to just thank Audience Republic, Universal Music and Eventbrite for helping put on tonight. It's been pretty amazing, but please give it up for the panellists, Joel, Georgie, Alice and Danny.